how would you describe the second round of reforms announced by the Uzbek government and the steps it's taken to really develop its economy further?
Well, thank you so much for the question. And let me just start by emphasizing that this country has been on a path of reforms for the last 5 years. And it has focused on such a broad set of reforms in such a short period of time that the next phase is going to continue to be equally exciting. Maybe I'll just reflect on a few reforms that we have seen have really helped build both resilience and growth for the country. The early reforms were really focused on price liberalization, as well as removing all barriers for trade, both domestic and international. There were also a lot of efforts to improve the business environment and the investment climate for new firms to be registered, as well as new firms to be registered with foreign capital. We have been heavily involved in all of the reforms, including also further liberalization in the agricultural sector. And there's also been an overhaul of the tax system. Together, these are reforms many countries spent years to implement. In Uzbekistan, it was done really since 2017, and it has really helped this country. Now, the second stage of reforms will be very interesting because they're being pursued under two very significant overarching goals that the president of the country has set and that the government is pursuing. On the one hand, Uzbekistan is seeking to halve poverty by 2026. And on the other hand, it's seeking to become an upper middle income country by 2030. This is going to require a significant growth rate every year, and it's going to imply an inclusive growth rate because of the poverty reduction that the government is seeking. So the World Bank is very, very interested and very, very committed to helping the government through to this next level of reforms. Now, what do we see as most important? I would mention four. The first is to continue the pursuit of a larger role by the private sector. And here we see both better access by the private sector to, let's say, capital and land, two binding constraints. And on the other hand, also continuing the path of privatizing. So this is privatization of state-owned enterprises, privatization of state-owned banks, but also privatization of small and medium enterprises that need to go to the market with greater capital. That's first. The second we see is to continue to really see what is the best role of the state. So the role has really been quite, and still is quite present in the economy. And what we see is an opportunity for the state to go from being what we call a doer to an enabler. This means setting policy, it means regulating, and it also means removing obstacles and constraints. So again, here we see a shift from a dominantly operational role to more of a policy setting, regulatory enabling role. And I think we can already start to see some of this in an area which I think is exciting, which is what they have done on the renewable energy side. Rather than investing by the public sector, they have put out tenders to the private sector, and not only to the private sector, for renewable energy, essentially achieving two goals: increase private sector participation, as well as start what we call the greening of the economy. Which brings me to the third goal that I see, and the third sort of strategic reform area, which is the green economy. So they have a huge opportunity here. The solar potential in this country is enormous. The goal is to have 25% renewable energy in the next few years. It's totally doable. And what we've seen already is by putting out these tenders, Uzbekistan is attracting investors from abroad. We're bringing not only finance, but also skills, technology, capacity, and know-how that's being transferred to Uzbekistan. So we see the energy sectors moving along very nicely in the green economy sense. Another area that Uzbekistan needs to continue to focus on is on natural resource efficiency, which also has a climate angle. This is a country that is very water scarce, and it's a country that needs a lot of water because it has a huge agricultural sector with irrigation needs. So water resource efficiency and technologies to make sure that the water that is used is minimized and can have the biggest impact is important. And the World Bank, again, is working throughout the country through various projects to help both on the agricultural side, water management, natural resource management, as well as irrigation, and that's very exciting. Now, my final area that I think reforms are needed and that are also very important for poverty reduction and for growth is human development. Here, there's been a stepped up acceleration on developing human capital in this country, particularly focusing on higher education to equip the young people of the country for the job market of the future, and that's very important. And I think what we have seen is that there were decades of decline in human capital indicators, and just in the last few years it's been a turnaround to really improve the level of enrollment in higher education, but also focus on health. And of course during COVID, health response has been big, but even more than so, we also see a big interest and a big shift of resources to what we call preventing disease. So working on basically equipping people with better health care, but also better health services for a productive long life. And finally, social safety nets, very important. The country will need to continue to provide support where it's needed the most. We are seeing a big overhaul of also the social safety net system to be more targeted, reach the people that need it the most, and be much more linked to also the reforms, as I mentioned, on the privatization side, as well as the state-owned enterprise reform side. So those two elements need to go hand in hand.
What should be the key priorities of the government as it delivers this transformation program? What should it pay close attention to?
So what I'm seeing is, first of all, an incredibly hardworking government. Our counterparts, ministers, deputy ministers, public sector officials, we have thousands of people working day and night to implement reforms in this country, and it's tireless. And I would just encourage them to continue because there's such a great commitment to see this country do well. So that's what focus on really pulling towards the same direction altogether. The other is making sure that there is broad stakeholder consultations on the reforms, because ultimately the reforms need to have buy-in and the reforms are for the people. So here I really like that there's a lot of outreach with a broader set of stakeholders. This means talking to people directly and talking to people outside of the capital, traveling, meeting people from around the country, making sure that the reforms are what we call people-centric. They are really listening to the people. And I think that's an important ingredient, and having that feedback loop. And then finally, I think a monitoring and evaluation system that always can check that the reforms are on track, they're generating the results that need to be generated, and to course correct when needed. Because with this large-scale reform program, sometimes things slow down, you need to accelerate it, or sometimes circumstances change and you have to make some adjustments and adapt. But what I find we have here is an incredibly committed team, great leadership from the top that really, as we keep hearing, this country is on an irreversible path of change. And I think with those, you have really the ingredients to make a very, very successful path forward.
And being here in Tashkent for the country's first ever economic forum, how significant is it? And maybe what does it say about the state of play here, the general atmosphere?
Well, I think this forum has been pretty incredible. First of all, to have 1,200 people attending, many in person, from both within Uzbekistan and from outside, and so many people wanting to attend and attending online, is just a great testament of the interest in Uzbekistan at this point. So I think that really was a very successful indicator for me. The second thing is, what I found is just the discourse and the quality of dialogue has been fantastic. And it has been very interesting because it hasn't been scripted in any way. People have shared their perspectives, their views, they've disagreed, all to have a quality discussion about what are the experiences in Uzbekistan, but also what are the experiences from outside that can benefit Uzbekistan. And I'm seeing this very interesting point to where Uzbekistan has been in absorption mode of what can we learn from others, to starting to become in the mode of what can we share with others. And for that, I just think this forum has been an incredible opportunity, and I actually hope it becomes a regular event.
And how would you describe the pace of reforms here?
Well, the pace of reforms has been faster than I've seen anywhere else, I think, and also broader. So I think the types of reforms that Uzbekistan has embarked since 2017, other countries spent decades pursuing.
Thank you.
Thank you.